Everyone talks about how incredible it is to live in Santa Barbara. And to be fair, a lot of what you hear is true. The coastline is beautiful. The lifestyle is relaxed. The architecture is timeless. And there's this feeling here that it's very hard to replicate anywhere else. After years of helping buyers relocate here, what I've found is this is the experience of actually living in Santa Barbara is a little different than what you would expect. There are a few things that tend to catch people off guard if they haven't spent meaningful time really understanding how Santa Barbara works. If you're even starting to think about making a move here, this is exactly the kind of insight that will save you time, energy, and in many cases, a very expensive mistake. If you're exploring Santa Barbara and want a clearer understanding of how the different areas actually live, not just how they look online, reach out anytime. I'd be happy to walk you through it. One of the first things that surprises people is that Santa Barbara doesn't have one consistent climate. It has multiple microclimates, and they can shift pretty dramatically within just a few miles. You can be on the Mesa near Ledbetter Beach, and it's bright, sunny, and warm. Then you drive 10 minutes into Montecito, and you're in a completely different environment with cooler air and a marine layer sitting in. Or you head up to the Riviera above Santa Barbara Mission, and suddenly you're above the fog with more sun, more light, and often warmer temperatures. This isn't something that happens occasionally. This is part of daily life here. There's also something we call May gray and June gloom, which a lot of people have heard of, but until you experience it, it's hard to fully understand. It's a marine layer that tends to roll in during late spring and early summer, especially in the mornings. Depending on where you are, the Mesa, Hope Ranch, Montecito, or the Riviera, it can burn off quickly, or it can linger for a bit longer. What's interesting is that this ends up influencing more than just the weather. It affects how much natural light your home gets, how warm or cool your space feels, and even how you experience your mornings and evenings. So when people say, I just want to be near the beach, what we usually end up talking through is what does that actually mean for how you want to live every day? Because here, location isn't just proximity. It's environment. Another thing that tends to surprise buyers is how different this real estate market operates compared to what they're used to, especially for clients coming from other major cities. There's this expectation that you can go online, see everything available, and move relatively quickly once you find something that works. But Santa Barbara doesn't operate like that. It truly is a process that takes a little time and patience, because inventory is extremely limited. Not just what you see on the MLS, but even more so when you factor in what never actually hits the market. In areas like Montecito and Hope Ranch, especially, a meaningful number of homes trade quietly off market through relationships before they're ever publicly listed, which means you're only looking online. You're only seeing part of what's actually available. And beyond that, pricing here doesn't always follow a predictable pattern. You can look at two homes, similar price, similar size, one in San Roque and one on the Riviera, and one sells immediately, while the other sits. The pricing can truly vary greatly from property to property. The difference often comes down to things that aren't obvious unless you really understand the nuances of each area. It could be the exact street, the orientation of the home, the quality of the view, or the level of privacy. This is where a market where nuance matters more than numbers. And because of that, strategy matters. This is also why having clarity before you start touring homes makes such a difference. If you're still figuring out how to approach this market, that's a conversation worth having early. Another shift that people don't always anticipate is the lifestyle itself. Santa Barbara is intentionally slower, and for a lot of people, that's exactly why they're drawn here. You're not dealing with the same level of traffic as you would in places like LA. You're not rushing from one thing to the next. There's more space to breathe. You find yourself spending time at the farmers market downtown, walking along the waterfront, grabbing coffee on Coast Village Road, or taking the long way home just because it's beautiful. There's a real sense of community here, but with that comes a different pace. Things don't happen as quickly as you might be used to. For most people, that becomes one of the best parts of living here, but it does take an adjustment. You're trading speed for quality of life. It's worth asking yourself, is that what you actually want your day-to-day life to feel like? One of the biggest conversations I end up having with buyers is around the balance between walkability and space, because a lot of people come in wanting both. They want to walk to restaurants, coffee, and shops, but they also want privacy, a larger lot, and a little separation from neighbors. In Santa Barbara, those two things don't always overlap. If you prioritize walkability, you're typically looking at areas like downtown Santa Barbara, some areas in San Roque or San Marcan, near the lower and upper village in Montecito, or parts of the Mesa. Those areas are vibrant, convenient, and full of energy, but they also come with smaller lots, less privacy, and a bit more density. On the other hand, if you're drawn to space, views, and privacy, you're usually looking at Montecito, Hope Ranch, or the Riviera. Those areas offer a completely different experience. More land, more quiet, more of that retreat-like feel. But you're also getting in the car more often. You're a little further removed from shops and restaurants. Rhythm of life feels more residential. Neither is better, but trying to find everything in one property here is where people get stuck. That's why getting clear on your priorities early matters so much. Then there's pricing. This is probably the biggest reality check for most buyers. Santa Barbara is a premium market. What you're buying here isn't just the home itself, it's the location, the lifestyle, the climate, and the long-term desirability. So what a certain price point gets you here can feel very different than what you would get in another market. You're not just buying square footage, you're buying scarcity. Santa Barbara doesn't have much vacant land since we are a small community located between the Pacific Ocean and the mountains. You're buying access to a lifestyle that's very difficult to replicate. That means the trade-offs at each price point are real. Understanding those trade-offs early is what allows you to make a confident decision instead of reacting to what you're seeing in the moment. So when people ask what it's really like to live in Santa Barbara, the answer is it's incredible, but it's also nuanced. The people who are happiest here are the ones who take the time to understand those nuances before they make the move. Not just where they want to live, but how they want to live. That's what ultimately shapes your experience here. If you're starting to explore Santa Barbara, or even just thinking about whether it might be a right fit, the best next step is getting clear on what your ideal lifestyle looks like and how that aligns with the different areas here. If you'd like help thinking that through, feel free to reach out anytime. I'm always happy to guide you through it.